So our question of the day is about the Los Angeles Rams, and it is, if Odell Beckham Jr. were to re-sign with the LA Rams, who becomes the Rams' second wide receiver? Is it Allen Robinson or is it Odell Beckham? Which one of them would have priority? And that gets us to the biggest reason why, when we talked to Matt about doing one of these shows, this was the team that I wanted to really have him on to discuss, because Allen Robinson is one of the most interesting players in the league coming into the 2022 season. For years, the deal about Allen Robinson was the statistics were not as good as the play on the field because of the quarterbacks that he had throwing him the ball. Last year, it certainly looked like he had just lost something. And whether that is that he was a step slow or whether it was emotional, I just don't care anymore. I mean, that's what happened to Randy Moss in Oakland. After what happened to Randy Moss in Oakland, I don't write off the idea that a player just can not care anymore and go to a new team and a new situation, and suddenly all that talent is back. So I wanted to talk to Matt about what reception perception says about Allen Robinson, who he was before last year, who he was last year, what he still has, and what he brings to the Rams.
Yeah, and Robinson is probably one of the players that's most kind of directly aligned when you think about reception perception, because, I mean, it was that was the first big prediction, was that he was going to have that breakout season in 2015. Shout out to me, I guess, right, for being correct on that. But yeah, I've always thought that he had all the skills to be a legit, prototypical number one wide receiver in the NFL. And his 2 years in Chicago in 2019, 2020, like you mentioned, they were not as statistically prolific, not like a top 5 fantasy receiver, leading the NFL in touchdowns like he did that 1 year in Jacksonville. But he was legitimately up there, 97th percentile in success rate versus man coverage, which is the main metric that reception perception tracks, how often they're beating man, zone, press coverage. And when I say it tracks, what I mean by that is I track, right? For those that are not familiar with reception perception, what I do is, over an 8-game sample for NFL players and college players, chart every single route that they run, how often they get open on each route, how often they run each route type, how often they open beat, man, zone, press coverage. Really, the goal is, which is a perfect player to talk about, Allen Robinson, in this way. How do you isolate a wide receiver from their surrounding variables? Because you guys know this, you need a lot of help as a wide receiver to put up good stats. And I don't think Allen Robinson has always been that guy that's gotten the help. But when you look at him in isolation, I think going into last year, he was putting up some of the best success rates, whether it's versus man or press coverage, across the entire NFL in 2019, 2020. Now, last year, I agree, certainly not that player, but I don't think he completely fell off the map either. He was still relatively high when you look at success rate versus man press coverage. Did fall off a good bit against zone. I think a lot of that can be chalked up to scheme as well. I mean, you've got freaking Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney with the Bears. Mooney's a speed-based receiver as well. Matt Nagy's gotten him running almost 40% flats, curls, slants, and I know they didn't have a good offensive line, but these are vertical guys that you want to release down the field. So I think that a lot of it was a lost year for Robinson. I put a lot of that on the surrounding variables. Fields, I like Justin Fields as a prospect, but he was pretty bad overall as a player in his first season. So to me, it was a lot of, whether Allen Robinson cares or not, or cared last year, I don't know. But if he didn't, I sure couldn't blame him, right? Dealing with injuries, rookie quarterback, bad coaching staff, a franchise that didn't pay him despite his ton of commitments. So I really think that Robinson is going to smash this year. I definitely fall on the very positive side of the projections, because I think he's still got it as a player, and this situation is awesome for him as well. So I'm very positive on Robinson this year.
He's been getting rave reviews at training camp.
Yes, rave reviews.
And at the same time, there's a little concern there. Van Jefferson has gone down with an injury. Yeah. So whoever's the number 2, if Odell returns, there's room for a number 2 and a number 3 right now, and targets to go around.
Right. If Odell returns, though, Odell would probably not return till mid-season. So that doesn't solve your Van Jefferson right now knee problem. So the first couple of weeks, at least, they're going to have to use Ben Skowronek or Tutu Atwell. I remember Playmaker Score liked Tutu Atwell, but he is a tiny little dude, and he's done nothing last year.
Right.
And they don't seem too jacked up about him right now either.
No.
He's not necessarily just going to walk right into that number 3 job with Van Jefferson. So it's not great. I mean, tough to use your second round pick on a receiver, and then you can't even really count on that guy right now.
On a team that uses his wide receivers as much as almost anyone. Jordan Rodriguez for the Atlantic had a story on how the Rams are going to cope without Jefferson, and she suggested a committee with Skoranek, Atwell, and other random spare parts they have laying around, which is possible, but it'd be a very non-Sean McVay thing to do. He's not a committee guy. I'm sticking with my 11 guys, and we're going down the field. So that would be an interesting change of philosophy, an interesting adjustment to circumstances. But it does show that Jefferson or no Jefferson, there may be room for Odell on this roster still.
Yeah, and I like what Jordan said in that article. I read the same article. It's like if you start shuffling in Skoranek and Atwell, the tiny guy and the huge guy who can block, you're just dictating what you're going to run. Right?
This is a run. This is a deep ball.
Right. And that's not exactly how Sean McVay likes to do things.
I wonder if they would sign someone who's still out there like a T.Y. Hilton or an Emmanuel Sanders to get them through the early part of the season. I mean, obviously that doesn't move the needle as much as a healthy OBJ, but you're not going to have a healthy OBJ.
Right.
Even when Beckham gets back, what kind of state is he going to be in too? This is his second torn ACL. It is super. It's a pretty recent one, obviously in the Super Bowl. So there's a lot of questions there. I think a trio of, and I like Van Jefferson too, by the way. Like I think he's a pretty good player, at least like a decently promising guy coming into his third year. So I think it's a kind of a sneaky big loss, like you guys mentioned, for a team that plays its guys and runs 11 personnel a ton.
And we want to take a crack at Bordelicious's question about the
will Robinson's performance, if significantly improved, be more of a referendum on Matt Nagy's scheme or the quarterback carousel in Chicago, or is there anything that would definitively tell us that?
All of the above.
Yes. I think that Nagy's done some decent stuff, like putting Robinson in the slot and stuff like that. But it's this past year was just a nightmare. I mean, I don't want to totally be like, let me say some good things about Matt Nagy. But at times they did some creative things to get him the ball. But I think more of it is it's a personality issue more than anything with Nagy and the way things ended there.
Old Heavy 403 wants to know, is the potential still there for the Rams to run it back this year? And the answer is, absolutely it is. Yeah. They're sixth in our simulations in Super Bowl odds. So this is team, I think they're the clear favorite in their division, with Seattle taking a huge step back and San Francisco dealing with a rookie quarterback and Arizona having the problems that we'll talk about some more when we get to Arizona in a few weeks. But, they added players, they added Robinson and they added Wagner, but they also lost a lot of players. So it feels like they're not quite as good as they were last year. The offensive line, I think, is where to really point to that. Not just losing Andrew Whitworth, although Joe Noteboom is a pretty passable left tackle to replace him, but the fact that they're depending on a third-round rookie at right guard. This is the team that doesn't want to draft anybody, and they're really depending on this. They're going to start a third-round rookie at right guard. Things are going to be a little bit more questionable, which means a little bit more pressure on Stafford, and a little bit more pressure on Stafford means he'll do dumb things a little bit more often, so probably won't look quite as good as last year.
The other concern I would have for the Rams is at cornerback, where Jalen Ramsey, A++++, good as it gets. Their the next top three corners, none of them had any good charting stats last year. They're all like bottom or outside of the top 60 in corners. Throw away from Jalen. It's going to be the plan A to beat the Rams every week. And
they really like Robert Rochelle, who was a fourth-round pick last year, but there's no track record on that guy.
Right. It's all unproven. It's all because they had no choice. They had to promote from within. Pretty much any hole they had, except they added Wagner and Robinson it's not necessarily a one-for-one swap for Robert Woods, but it's a starting receiver out and a starting veteran out and a starting veteran in. So that's not a massive improvement. But Robert Rochelle is the guy they like, and
there's David Long and Troy Hill coming back.
Hill, thank you. Troy Hill, who did not have a good year in Cleveland at all, and David Long didn't have a good year last year. So they're betting on potential, which is all they can do at this point. But they won the Super Bowl last year basically with a stars and scrubs model. And this works when you have superstars and when you have the best wide receiver in the league and the best defensive tackle in the league and the best quarterback in the league, or at least a reasonable argument for all three of those, then you can make it work. It doesn't work if you have good players at those positions. You have to have the best players at those positions and a quarterback, and they got all those.
Any concerns about Stafford's shoulder right now? That's been popping across the news.
I know. I've not been following day-to-day reports that closely. It sounds like an issue for now, but this is a guy who's a veteran, second year with a team. If this was a rookie, if this was Trey Lance in San Francisco, it would be very, very bad news. As it is, he'll probably miss some time in camp and then step right in and pick up right where he left off. So I don't think it's expected to be a major issue.
I'll point out the pass rush is another issue, by the way, because there's no Von Miller anymore.
No Von Miller.
And so now Justin Hollins, who's been around for a couple of years but has not really done much, is starting opposite Leonard Floyd. And, you can kind of get away with that because Aaron Donald is like 2 pass rushers by himself. But you still would rather have better edge rushers than what the Rams have.
You would always rather have Von Miller than not have Von Miller. That's a good plan for anybody. But
they feel like they could make another move like a Von Miller type of trade in the middle of the season. I wouldn't be surprised with that as well. Like I feel like they're a team that we always constantly have to say the roster that they go into week 1 with, probably not the roster that they enter the playoffs with, right?
That is true.
Obviously, they added Von Miller midway last year. They added Beckham last year midway through. Like they're definitely a candidate to do that every single season, and they probably don't. I don't think it's like a stretch to say they don't get to the Super Bowl without Von Miller or Odell Beckham.
No.
Yeah, and they like Beckham was a huge part of that Super Bowl game plan as well. Like everybody has basically confirmed that, and you could confirm that by just watching the game.
Just watch the game.
That's another thing. There's a good chance they add some significant players middle of the season. Obviously, we still don't know who those guys are going to be now.
What are they going to trade? A 2037?
That is the issue.
That's the thing, that they've run out of ways of making that work. So I don't know how they're going to get that guy.
I will add the year before they also added Jalen Ramsey midseason, so they do have a track record of doing this. But Mike makes the point: they are essentially broke. They have nothing left to trade in the near future, so that they're going to have to adjust and find a new plan because their old plan, the resources just aren't there.
Right.
But I think we all agree the favorite in the NFC West.
Yes.
I think very clearly, yeah.
Division winner for the NFC West, excuse me. Rams at plus 125, 49ers at plus 150.
Yeah, I feel like that's got the 49ers a little too high. With a rookie quarterback, that's a little too much trust. And I mean, not a rookie quarterback, but effective.
Well, he's a few weeks older. Trey Lance is a few weeks older than Malik Willis, who nobody expects to play this year. He's still younger than Matt Corral, Kenny Pickett, or any of the other not prominent quarterbacks drafted this year. So he's still a kid, and it's fair to be skeptical about what he can do until he gets through a full year.